Hello. Today we're starting reading the Torah again. So it's the first Parsha, Bereshit. What I intend to do basically, since we're going second time around the cycle of reading the Torah, is hopefully I will manage to get a little bit deeper in each Parsha and see whether we can in simple way explain basically and discuss the issues discussed in the Parsha. So Bereshit, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was formless and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered above the surface of the waters. So what we're looking at is total chaos, basically, the total formlessness. There was nothing, basically. So the world was one big mess. Nothing was in its place, and during the first 6 days of creation, God put each thing in the right place where it belonged. So let us see how. So day one, God started with the words, "Let there be light," and finished with separated night and day. What that means, night and day, we don't know yet. And we'll come to that, because there is no sun and no moon. On the second day, God divided the sky from the earth. And on the third day, God separated the land from the sea and created the trees, flowers, and grass. On the fourth day, God put the sun, moon, and the stars in their rightful places. On the fifth day, God put the fish, birds, and reptiles, like, snakes and lizards and all this other stuff in their places. On the sixth day, God created land animals, like cows and sheep, and the very first human beings, Adam and Eve. And on the seventh day, God stopped working and rested. It was the first Shabbat. Adam and Eve marry and go to live in the Garden of Eden, a beautiful place where they have got everything what they require. It was all ready for them, and they have beautiful fruit trees from which they can eat to their heart's desire, and all sorts of plants, flowers, rivers flowing, joyful life from for Adam and Eve. And they able to eat from every plant except one tree of knowledge of good and evil, which God does not allow them to eat from. And then what happens, as we all know, the evil snake convinces Eve to take a bite, and she gives a bite to Adam as well. So Adam and Eve are thrown out of the Garden of Eden as punishment, and from that day onwards they have to work for a living and do not have an easy life as what they had before. In the process of all of this, Eve gives birth to two sons, Cain and Abel, and Cain has an argument with Abel, and there are numerous interpretations what was the reason for that, and he murders him, and becomes, as a consequence, he becomes an eternal wanderer. He wouldn't have a place of his own forever. And then, quite after a considerable time, Adam and Eve have the third son, Seth, and 8 generations later, his descendant is Noah, and he is the only righteous man in very, very corrupt world. That's the basically short description of what this parsha, this portion of the Torah, Bereshit, is talking about. And I'm sure you all know about it more or less with different levels of complexity. What I would like to introduce to you is one of the most difficult questions everyone is facing today when discussions of Torah take place. How old is the world? Because we Jews just celebrated a few weeks ago Rosh Hashanah, year 5778, where the scientific fraternity tells us that through the archaeological and anthropological findings from the calculations done by the Hubble telescope, etc., the world is 15 billion years old. And there is so that's a big difference. Huge. So how do we correlate all of this? Everything I'm going to say from this moment onwards, I learned from an article which is basically promoting a book by Dr. Gerald Schroeder, who is a scientist in quantum physics, in nuclear physics. He's done his doctorate in Massachusetts University, and I found this article at the AISH.com website. So how do we try to correlate this? I'm well aware that Hasidut and Orthodox Judaism has got an explanation to that, and it goes approximately as follows. The world may be only up to 6,000 years old, and God probably put all the fossils in the ground and juggled the light arriving from the distant galaxies to make the world appear to look billions of years old. And there is no, all the bones of the dinosaurs, or everything has been put in their rightful place at the rightful level by God, who is mighty and all capable. There is no way that we can either prove or disprove that statement. It's absolutely no way to disprove this claim at all. God, in his total capability to influence the fabric of time and space and the material world, he could do that. Yes, there is no other possible approach that also agrees with the ancient commentators' description of God and nature. So the world may be young and old at the same time. Trying to resolve this apparent conflict of our perception, scientific perception, that the world is billions, 15 and three-quarter billions years old, versus the Jewish calendar, we need to look a little bit deeper. And this is what Dr. Gerald Schroeder is doing in his book. So what he says, first of all, let's understand one thing. What I'm going to say is a scientific evaluation and scientific hypothesis maybe, but it makes a lot of sense. It's very logical, and it really provides some foundation to the question which we're discussing. The truth of the matter is that the science has changed its perception and its explanation of the world, the way the universe is. However, Torah did not. And I will refer, as Dr. Schroeder refers, only to the biblical commentaries which were written long time ago, well before the modern scientific findings and well before the Hubble telescope, for sure. The Bible itself, the Torah itself, is 3,400, 3,300 years old from the moment we received it. And the translation of the Torah into Aramaic by Ankelos was done about 100 Common Era, and the Talmud was written in a form which we can read it, is about the year 500 Common Era. And the three major Torah commentators, there are many commentators, but the top of the mountain of these are those three, I believe, and they accepted by everybody. And this is Rashi, who lived in the 11th century France, who brings the straight understanding of the text of the Torah. Maimonides, 12th century Egypt, who handles the philosophical concepts. And then Nachmanides, 13th century Spain, the earliest of the Kabbalists we know at this point in time. In 1959, a survey was taken by leading American scientists. Among many questions which were asked, what is the concept of the age of the universe? Now, in 1959, astronomy was popular, but cosmology, the deep physics, and the understanding of the universe were just at the very embryonic stage, were just developing. And the response to that survey was recently published in Scientific American as well. That the most widely read science journal in the world, and 2/3 of the scientists gave the same answer in 1959. The beginning? There was no beginning. Aristotle and Plato taught us that 2,400 years ago that the universe is eternal. That's what they were saying. Aristotle and Plato. And modern science in 1959, majority of the scientists were following that level of understanding. So they were thinking there was no beginning. And then what happened? In 1965, Penzias and Wilson discovered the echo of the Big Bang in the black of the sky at night, and the world paradigm has changed. From universe that was eternal, the universe suddenly had a beginning. You see, science overnight, basically in 1965, after 3,000 years of arguing, it started to agree with Torah, which Torah was saying forever. It was saying there was a beginning. This is Bereshit, in the beginning. In order to understand this, we need to understand the origin of the biblical calendar. The Jewish year is figured by adding up the generations since Adam. Additionally, there are 6 days leading up to creation of Adam. And these 6 days are very significant as well. Now, where is the 0 point starts from in Jewish calendar? On Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, upon blowing the shofar, the following sentence is said, Hayom Harat Olam, today is the birthday of the world. This verse might imply that Rosh Hashanah commemorates the creation of the universe, but it doesn't. Rosh Hashanah commemorates the creation of the neshama, the soul of human life. We start counting our 5,778th year today from creation of the soul of Adam. We have a clock that begins with Adam, and the 6 days are separate from that clock. The Bible has 2 clocks. And that might seem like a modern rationalization if it were not for the fact that Talmudic commentaries 1,500 years ago brings this information. In Midrash, Vayikra Rabbah 29:1, an expansion of Talmud, all the sages agree that Rosh Hashanah commemorates the soul of Adam, and that the 6 days of Genesis are separate. You see, Dr. Schroeder really slowly going through the facts stated by the Torah and by the modern science. Why were those 6 days taken out of the calendar? That's an interesting question, and we will come to that. Then, time is described differently in those 6 days of Genesis. Because what it says in there in Bereshit, there was evening and morning. It's an exotic, unusual description of time, particularly taking into consideration what evening, what morning, there is no sun, there is no moon yet, because that, as we just discussed a few seconds ago, that was done on day 4, on the 4th day. So once you come from Adam to flow of time is totally, from Adam the flow of time is totally in our human terms. And we know that because Adam and Eve lived 130 years before they have children, and Seth lived for 105 years before having children as well, and from Adam forward the flow of time is totally human in our normal 24 hours day concept. But prior to that, time is described in very abstract concept. Evening, morning, it's as if you're looking down on events from a viewpoint that is not intimately related to us, human beings. In trying to understand the flow of time here, you have to remember that the entire 6 days is described in only 31 sentences. 31 sentences. Come on, guys, have a look at this, and it's absolutely true. Now, the early Jewish sources tell us that the Bible calendar has 2 parts, and even predating the Leviticus Rabbah, which goes back almost 1500 years ago, and it says explicitly in the closing speech of Moshe. None other than Moshe says this. And now what he says is the following. If you want to see the fingerprint of God in the universe, consider the days of old, the years of many, and then he says, or the years of many generations. Deuteronomy 32:7. Nachmanides, in the name of Kabbalah, says, why does Moses break the calendar into 2 parts? The days of old and the years of many generations. Because the days of old are the 6 days of Genesis. The years of many generations is all that from Adam forward. Then there is another example. There was evening and there was morning. Day 1. That is the first time that a day is quantified, evening and morning. Nachmanides discusses this meaning of evening and morning, and does it mean sunset and sunrise? No. It's our perception, but there is no sun and no moon yet, and there is nothing to come up and come down. Nachmanides points out the problem with that, and he says that the text, day 1, evening and morning, and then he says a second day, evening and morning, a third day, etc. Then on the 4th day, the sun is mentioned. Nachmanides says that any intelligent reader can see an obvious problem with that. And how do we have a concept of evening and morning for the first 3 days if the sun is only mentioned on day 4? So that is the time goes by and people understand more about the universe, and you can dig deeper into the text. When you start digging into the text, Nachmanides says that the text uses the words Vayihi Erev, but it means there was evening, Vayihi Erev. The thing is that Hebrew letters Ein Resh Bet, the root of Erev is house. And the mixture or disorder That's why evening is called Erev, because when the sun goes down, things become blurry, not really clear. That's what Erev means. The literal meaning is disorder. The Torah word for morning is boker, and it's absolutely opposite to the Erev. When the sun rises, the world becomes bikoret, orderly, able to be discerned. This is why the sun, there was no need to mention it until day 4. Because from Erev to Baker is a flow from disorder to order, from house to cosmos. The Torah wants us to be amazed by this flow, and starting with chaotic plasma and ending up with the symphony of life. Day by day, the world progresses to higher and higher levels, and order out of disorder. It's purely thermodynamics at work, and it's stated in terminology of 3,000 years ago. Each day of creation of time is numbered, yet there is this continuity in the way of days are numbered. The verse says there is evening and morning, day 1, but the second day doesn't say evening and morning, it says day 2. Rather, it says evening and morning a second day. And the Torah continues with the pattern evening and morning, third day, and fourth day, and so on and so on. Only for the first day, the text says day 1. Many English translators actually of the Torah substituted the Yom Echad, which is day 1, with first day, just to keep it sort of orderly. But by doing that, they basically took out the whole concept, the whole code written down in Torah in those 31 sentences. Nachmanides explains that on day 1, time was created. That is the phenomenal insight. Time was created. You can't grab the time. You don't even see the time. You can see space, but you can see matter. You can feel energy. You can see light, energy. But you cannot see the time. But what has happened is the creation of time, and Nachmanides describes that 800 years ago. Nachmanides attained this insight from Torah use of the phrase day 1. And that's exactly what Einstein taught in the laws of relativity. That there was a creation, not just a space and matter, but of time itself. That the creation was, the Big Bang has created the time itself. If you go into the nitty-gritty of Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, you will find that time is a dimension. Time is affected by your view of time. How you see the time depends on where you are viewing it from. A minute on the moon goes faster than a minute on Earth, and the minute on the sun goes much slower than the minute on Earth. The differences are relatively small, but there are differences. The flow of time varies subject to location and your perception of the other location. Hence the term, the law of relativity. How this specific location from which you observe the time is related to the other location, where the time, which is the time flow you're observing. Nachmanides further writes, and he says, Mishtaya yitfos bozman. Time is created at the beginning, but time grabs hold. That's what he says. The time grabs hold. When matters condenses and come together, this is when the time continuum took hold of the clocks. That's when the biblical clock of the 6 days has started. Nachmanides has made phenomenal statements. hundreds and hundreds of years ago, I don't know whether he knew the law of relativity, but we know the Einstein's laws now. And we know that the energy, the light beam, radio waves, gamma rays, X-rays, all of this is traveling at the speed of light. When it travels at the speed of light, 300 million meters per second. At that speed of light, time does not pass. Time stops. The universe was aging, but time only grabs hold when the matter is present. It means physicality. It's called in Kabbalistic terms Malchut, the physical world, our world. The moment of time before the clock begins, for the Bible, lasted about 100,000th of a second, a minuscule time. But in that time, the universe expanded from a tiny speck to about the size of a solar system, let's say. But then from that moment on, we have matter and time flows forward. And the biblical clocks begins here, one of the two clocks. Now we can go one step further. Let's look at the development of time day by day. Based on expansion factor, every time the universe doubles, the perception of time is cut in half. Now, when the universe was small, it was doubling very rapidly. But when the universe gets bigger, the doubling time gets longer. And at this rate for expansion, it's quoted in the principles of physical cosmology and textbooks that used literally around the world. So the calculations are as follows. The first of the biblical days lasted 24 hours, viewed from the beginning of time perspective. But duration from our perspective of this day was 8 billion years. Because the universe just started to expand in day one. It was small and it was doubling very quickly. But so from point of view of Hashem, it was 24 hours. But from point of view of human beings, here in this physical world, which we won't be finding now, it was 8 billion years. The second day, from Bible's perspective, lasted 24 hours. Again, from God's perspective, 24 hours. From our perspective, it lasted half of that previous day, 4 billion years. The third day, again, from God's perspective, 24 hours day, but it lasted only from human perspective, 2 billion years. The fourth day, 24 hours from God's perspective, 1 billion years from human. And so on, and until the fifth day, 24 hours day from God's perspective is only 500 million years from human terms, in human terms. And the sixth day lasted only 250 million years, which is equivalent to the 24 hours. So when you sum up all of those first 6 days before creation of Adam, you will finish up with 15 and 3/4 billion years, which is exactly the same as modern cosmology through Hubble telescope calculations as well as carbon dating, etc., is coming up with. Is it just a coincidence? No, it's not. It's what it is. But there is more. Bible goes out on a whole limb, decoded system in those 31 sentences of the 6 days, the first 6 days of creation. Look what it tells us. It tells us what happened on each of those days. Now you can see that the cosmology, the paleontology, the archaeology, and they look at the history of the world and see whether or not they match up day by day. Look, I have got no time to go into details of this, but I can give you one hint. The matching up of all of those 6 days of creation, which I stated on the very beginning, with the historical terminology of the findings of the paleontology regarding the dinosaurs, etc., or cosmology as far as formation of the planets and universe, or archaeological findings, etc., it coincides with these findings, and to a level where you get goosebumps. And this is what I would like to share with you. The thing is that there is no contradiction. It's just two different clocks. One clock existed for the first 6 days of creation, and it lasted for that long, but from God's perspective it was 6 days. From human perspective, 15.75 billion years. And now we just celebrated year 5778. And this is what the Torah tells us. Have a nice day, and I will see you in the next Parsha, Noah. Goodbye.